Anyway, let's go to the game. Gukesh now with the white pieces opens with 1 e4. Abasov responds back with e5. Very solid, very straightforward. Gukesh now brings his knight out to f3. And what will be Abasov's decision here? Whoa, he goes for the Petrov, the super solid Petrov. It's interesting that both Gukesh and Prag are facing Petrov in this round. Prag against Nepomniachtchi, Gukesh against Nijat. And Gukesh goes for d4 move. Of course, you can also play the main move, which is knight takes e5, but d4 is also a very popular way to meet the Petrov. And Nijat now takes the pawn with his knight. By the way, there's also this line which is very sharp with bishop c5. Crazy line. But for the time being, Gukesh says, I don't want to go there. I'm just going to hit your knight here. And Nijat plays d5. And now knight takes e5 is possible. But he takes d takes e5. And I think the reason for this choice by Gukesh is that he wants to keep some sort of imbalance in the position and not have the standard one. By the way, the video footage of this game is slightly laggy because that is how it was being shot, and so you might face some frames dropping here. But bishop comes back. Now the knight was hitting the bishop, so the bishop drops back to e2. And now Nijat puts his bishop on e7. Gukesh castles. Simple move. And Nijat also would castle, I believe, here. That seems like the most normal thing to do in this position. Thinking for a bit. Yes, he castles. So let's have a look at the imbalances in this position. White has more space because of the e-pawn, but black has a very solid structure here, the majority on the queen side. Now Gukesh plays his rook to e1, bolstering this pawn on e5, which is always a good idea. If you overprotect your strong points, that is always helpful. So Nijat has to decide now what to do. He goes for the move c6, again strengthening his pawn center. The bishop can come out here, the knight can go back, the knight can develop on d7. That's the plan. Gukesh plays his knight to d2 and improves his development. And now Nijat plays knight to d7. He's not yet sure whether he should put his bishop out here or not, and that's why he first brings his knight out. And Gukesh can actually play his knight to b3 to challenge the knight here on c5, but he first plays his pawn to h3. Again, a useful move, a quiet move, so that bishop g4 doesn't come in the future. And now pawn to a5. So Nijat is trying to gain space on the queen side. He wants to play a4, a3. If you were to play a4, then somehow this knight is very secure here. So Gukesh says, let me first get rid of the knight there. He goes knight to b3. And Nijat now thinking for his move. He plays pawn to f6. Very interesting move. He could have also continued with a4, when actually after takes black is doing very fine. But with f6 he wants to take away the space. So Gukesh takes on f6, and now he doesn't have that pawn. But because of this, what has happened is that the e file has opened up, and to some and in some ways to white's advantage, because after, let's say, take and bishop d3, white would have the first control of the e file. Instead, he goes bishop e3, attacking the knight on c5. Nijat moves his knight to the center of the board. Next, he would like to push a4, a3 and weaken the c3 square for his knight. So Gukesh pursues the knight, wants to trade it off. And Nijat gains even more space on the queen side. He's been playing very well in this game until now. He has 1 hour 17 minutes. Gukesh has 1 hour 7 minutes. Now Gukesh takes the knight. If you take with the pawn, I can trade queens, and then this pawn can get a bit loose and weak. So instead he takes back with the knight, which is I think the right thing to do. And now Gukesh places his pawn on e3 because it was important to stop black from pushing it and weakening this square. So pawn to a3 played, and Nijat goes bishop c5. He's trading more pieces. Very logical thing to do. Also, this has been Nijat's strategy to be very solid in this tournament. He has been successful. Gukesh plays bishop d3. Nijat takes on e3. And I think you can take back with the rook. Rook takes on e3. And now the pawn is hanging because take, rook takes is hanging. And so Nijat plays a very interesting move, queen f6. He's putting pressure on b2. And also later bishop takes h3 and pressure down the f file could become a real thing. For now, just the pawn moves up to c3. Blocking the bishop, blocking the queen. Also, this a4 pawn can get weak, and let's say a move like b5 maybe not the best because of queen c2. So he goes bishop f5 to bolster the center, and Gukesh plays queen to e2, improving the position. At least visually it seems like black has no real issues. He wants to trade off the bishops as well here. Not seeing any other way out of this, he trades the bishops. Bishop takes on f5. I think he should take here with the queen, not with the knight. Taking with the knight would be a big mistake, big error, because you know, if you take with the queen, the knight could go to e4, but he's taken with the knight. The knight is totally misplaced here because now the queen can enter in. Yes, rook to e6 played by Gukesh, attacking the queen. The queen has to move, and it can go to f7, it can go to d8. He goes back to f7. If you go knight to g5, there is queen d7. And so he plays again the best move, bringing the rook into the game. Rook e1. Pawn comes up to h6, stopping knight g5. And now, can Gukesh find this very nice move, rook queen c2? The reason why queen c2, yes, he finds it, is very strong is because now the a pawn is weak. It has to be constantly defended by the rook. If you play b5 to defend this, I will simply chop off your pawn there. So that's the reason why Nijat has to play queen to d7. And maybe Gukesh can be a little bit brave here and go g4, because then once the knight moves, he can go to e7. The queen could jump in. So it can all get very dangerous. But in fact, Gukesh goes c4. He breaks the center, and I think Nijat might do well to keep it closed. Yes, he plays d4. He keeps it closed. And now Gukesh is thinking, if black gets c5, it would become a protected passer. And so Gukesh goes c5, and he says, I wouldn't allow you to connect your pawns. Queen f7 played by Nijat. His d pawn is his trump card for black. It's a very, very strong pawn. And now rook e4 played by Gukesh. If this knight can be removed, then the pawn will fall for sure. So Nijat plays queen d5. And now rook e5 attacking the queen and the knight. I think he will go back to f7. Goes back, and now rook e4 again. Ooh, they've repeated it twice already with rook e4. Now queen d5. Will Gukesh repeat it? It's still, this might be the second time. And so he plays it. He's alert. He sees that it has been repeated only twice, and if you repeat it thrice, then it's a draw. So here he goes back, and now I think important for Gukesh to change the move, otherwise it will be a threefold repetition. Thinking about it, and plays the other rook to e4. And now Nijat has to decide what to do. He goes rook d8, threatening maybe to push the pawn, but also giving up the a4 pawn. We can take it, but I think Gukesh wants to play rook to f4. Very classy play, step by step. First got the rook here, then the other rook. Knight on f3 is doing a brilliant job. So all in all, a fine position for white here. Nijat pushes his pawn to d3, and Gukesh quickly chops off the pawn on a4. And now Nijat is a pawn down. He must tread carefully. Queen a2. The king comes up to h2, just to avoid any checks. And of course, if you are going to take this pawn, then this is hanging. So he played g6, queen b4, attacking b7, and now the queen comes back to defend. But this moves, last few moves haven't been that inspiring. Of course, there's always a chance for the opponent to go wrong, but it may not be easy. Rook e8, offering a trade of rooks here. Gukesh maybe wants to take it, maybe doesn't want to take it. I think taking might not be such a bad idea. He plays rook e4. Maybe he just enjoys his rook being on the 4th rank. And so rook takes rook, rook takes rook has occurred, and then rook to d5 played here by Nijat. Knight d2, and Nijat goes back with his knight to g7. Gukesh comes back with his king just in case there are any checks in the position. And now the knight comes to e6. And all of a sudden you can see, by the way, they have reached 40 moves now, and the arbiter asks Gukesh to write down his score sheet because he was down to last few seconds for last 6 moves or so. Finally, he's got 30 minutes on the clock, so he calmly writes down. Rook e3 played, knight takes c5 is on the board, and now Nijat is equal. From getting into a tough position, he is equalized against a much higher rated opponent, which is a great news for the Azeri fans. And now knight comes back. Maybe a mistake. He should have played knight d7, so that even if rook takes, there is knight e5 4th. But knight e6. Now Gukesh takes the pawn. Why not? It's a free juicy pawn, and he takes it. Now pawn comes to b5. Queen to c3 played. And he plays his knight to f4. Rook e3 was important, otherwise there would have been a fork to win the queen. So rook e3, and now he plays rook to g5, threatening an attack here. The winning move is to take, check, and king f1, and there are no good discoveries by the knight because g2 hangs, and this is the winning move. But after rook g5, Gukesh played knight to e4. He missed it. Queen takes c6, and now after knight e4, rook takes, king h1, knight d5, forking here. But there you have knight f6 check, knight takes, king takes, the knight comes back to fork, and Gukesh has chopped off the pawn on c6 now. Knight to e3 played, fe3, and the position is now very close to a draw because white is only a pawn up in this queen endgame, and it might not be so easy. So queen f5 played, and creating a passer on the queen side with such a weak king is not so easy. White would love to transport the king here, but it's not so simple. And so Gukesh plays b3. And now Nijat plays his pawn to h5. Trying to use his majority to create a passer. Gukesh has his own majority here to create a passer. This can become a very, very crucial game from the tournament standings perspective, because a4 played, he takes, because if he manages to win this, his chances of winning this candidates improve. He'll move into the joint lead. Now queen g5 check, king f2, played check, king here, queen g5 check, king f2, queen 5, king e2. And this is the position where he's bringing the king into the game, is Gukesh, because he wants to keep the game going. He has an edge here, he has an extra pawn, but the queen endgames are so tricky. And let's see how Gukesh deals with it. One of the best queen endgames player of all time is Magnus Carlsen, because in that often there are calculations that are so deep that it's not so easy to find the best moves. e4, queen takes. No, he's trying to repeat here. He's trying to repeat check. King g2. And now after check, Gukesh moves his king. There's another check. It's already repeated twice, but this time Gukesh goes to e2, not accepting a draw. Abasov says, thank you, I'm going to start pushing my king side pawns down to the queening square. And Gukesh pushes his central pawn so that it can also start moving ahead. Well, it's time to give up your h3 pawn. That's what's going to happen. Yes, he takes, check, king h8, and now you can pick up the pawn here on g5. But it could also mean that you would lose one of these pawns in certain way. So check, king g8, Gukesh takes the pawn with a check. We are on move 62 now. Abasov has to decide whether he wants to come in the center or on the side. Getting to the side is the safest actually. He plays it to the side of the board, and now Gukesh thinking about a check, king here. Check, king h8. And somewhere or the other Gukesh has to start making progress, and this he does now with the move a5. Nijat, so thinking here, he pushes his own pawn. The engines are saying it's equal. It seems like the game will end in a draw. After all these fights, ours making queens and so on, it might end in a draw perhaps. Check. g8, and now Gukesh gives a check, king goes back to h8. So he's boxed his king in. Now all that he has to do is to start pushing his pawns, and I think a6 is a very good starting point because the queen defends f5 as well as a6, so kind of takes care of the kids. And so a6, in comes a check, king e3, check. It's going to be the check again, yes, check. And now, in order to break free from the check, do you go king d4? Maybe, not so sure here. Nijat is thinking king e2 played by Gukesh. It's interesting how the white king queen has blocked king's path to do anything. Check king d3 while white is looking for ways to so check. King goes to c4 now. This time he's getting ready for the king march. And Nijat Abasov now gives a check. King d5. The king keeps moving in. And you can see Gukesh's body language. He does feel that he's now very close to winning. A check again. But in such an open board, it's not easy to get rid of the checks. He brings the queen in. Of course, trading the queen would be suicidal. So, check. And he plays his king to e6 now. Nijat pushes his h pawn down the board. This is a strong pawn. And this is going to be very, very interesting. What will happen next after h3? Gukesh goes king f7, threatening a mate in one. That's interesting. Maybe now check is important. Plays queen a2. Maybe queen e6 is fine now. And so plays queen to e6. And let's say if Nijat takes the queen, because both sides will make queens at the same time. Yes, he did. And then white will be left with an extra pawn. So a2, a7, h2. Both sides are going to queen here, and Gukesh queens with a check. What an exciting moment here. It's a check to the black king. Black king has to and now king comes up to g7. There's no real mating net here, but you continue playing with white. You have an extra pawn. You don't draw just like that at the candidates when you have an advantage. King h6. And now queen e3 check. So good move, because if the king comes forward, there can be some other issues here. So he played king h5 anyway, regardless of that. Now I think yes, Gukesh is bringing the king in. Well, the winning move here was queen c5, and that one white is winning, but he goes king f5, queen f1. The last defensive attempt was queen g2 when the position was in. And he goes king f5, brings the king near, check, queen blocks, gives another check here. You can push the pawn. You can also bring the queen in here. Very cool, because the queen trade is losing, and if you give any other checks, the king moves and I give you a counter check. Very, very smart decision there. Gukesh gets up from the table. He knows he's winning. This is all psychology at play. He's very good at it. Both moves of the king win. King f4 and king f6. But queen e6 does not win because of queen g7. So king f6 check, and there you have it. The game is over, because if king here on h6, there is queen h2 mate. He goes to h5, but now after queen g5 check, king h3, queen f5, the queens are traded, and the rest is easy. Gukesh shakes hands and he moves into the lead of the tournament.